In this video, I'm going to take you through each of the steps required to build an entire WordPress website with a truly unique design and feature set using Elementor Pro and some of the Crocoblock plugins to build a great looking listing type website. Now, while this example demonstrates the techniques used in recipes, you could just as easily use the skills to build a property listing website or a business listing site. The most important takeaway here today are the skills and not the chosen topic. Firstly, I'll show you exactly what we'll be building, and then we'll take a look at the tools we'll be using. As always, all the links to everything I cover will be in the description below, so be sure to check those out once you finish this tutorial. Oh, and to make things just a little easier, there are full timestamps listed below so you can jump around as you see fit. Okay, so let's take a look now at what we're going to be building in today's tutorial. So for today's deep dive, this is the site we're going to be looking at creating. We're going to cover all the design aspects as well as all the underlying features that are going to be included in it. So we're going to take a look at how we can create the header through templates. We're going to create the page layouts. We're going to create the individual layouts for each of these individual items. We're also going to take a look at how we can add our own custom search. We're going to take a look at how we can add all these cool filters, and we can filter everything we want on the fly. So very easy to use. We can just come through, filter all these out. We can easily stack these on top of each other to build up our filters, all looking pretty cool. We're also going to take a look at the individual template used to create the individual pages for our recipes. Now, even though this is recipes, you can use any kind of content you want. This is all about showing you the skills, and then you can take those skills and develop them to do whatever you want to do for your custom website. We're also going to take a look at how we can create this repeater section over on the top right hand side where we've got all the nutritional information. So these are some basic features, some more advanced features, but all the skills you're going to learn today are really going to be super useful to help you get a lot more out of WordPress and a lot of the Jet products. Now we've seen what we're going to be creating, let's take a look at the tools we're going to be using to create it. We're going to be using Elementor and Elementor Pro, so we want to be able to access all of the templating system that we have as part of Elementor Pro. But if you wanted to, you could use Jet Theme Core. That kind of replaces a lot of what you can do inside the Pro version of Elementor. So if you wanted to use that, you could do that. And if you'd like me to create some content on how to use Jet Theme Core with the free version of Elementor, let me know in the comment section below. We're also going to be using JetEngine so we can deal with all of our custom post types, our taxonomies, all those kinds of things. Jet Search and Jet Smart Filters so we can filter all of our data. That's the key tools we're going to be using. The nice thing is, because we're using Crocoblock and they all work together, we are cutting down on the number of plugins we would need to be able to create a site like this. Now, on top of these plugins, we're also going to be using the free Hello theme for Elementor because it's a great starting point. They're just basically a blank theme that allows us to do some of the key things, but also keep WordPress happy. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is go ahead and start setting up our global styles for our entire site. And to make life easy, I've already created a file that allows you to install this template, and you can use that to help you when you're styling your headers, your body text, your forms, your images, and all those kinds of things. Link is in the description below. So let me show you how you install that first of all, and then we'll see how we start to set up all those global colors. So we're going to come over into templates, we're going to come into save templates, and inside there we're just going to say import. You can see it says choose file, so I'm simply going to drag my file up onto there, import that, give it a second or so, and you can see there's our theme style preview. We edit that with Elementor, we can now just come in and start to use this as the basis for all of our styling. And as you can see, it is just literally the headings 1 through 6. You've got some body text, you've got a form, a button, and you've got an image. This just allows us to create various different styling options as defaults for these various different elements. Let's start by taking a look at how Elementor's global styling can speed up the process of designing our entire site. We need to come to the hamburger menu in the top left and choose Site Settings. And this is where we have access to all of these global settings. So first of all, we have the global colors. You can see we have 4 primary colors we're working with: your primary, your secondary, your text, and your accent. So we can change these, we can rename them, we just can't delete them. But we can add in additional colors and we can delete those additional colors, but we can't do that with the first 4. These are integral to the whole way that Elementor works. So what we're going to do is we're going to change these colors first of all. I've already saved a selection of colors I want to use, and I'm simply going to just insert the values into here. So you can see once we insert that value, you can see that now updates. Secondary and text is perfectly fine. We're going to leave those as they are. We're going to change the accent color though. We're going to just change that from there, and we're going to set this to be white. I'm going to change from accent, and I'm just going to name this white. We'll do the same again. We're going to add another color. This time we're going to add in a black, because it's always handy to have your black and white colors, because there's various different times you may want to use these. So we're just going to call this black. And I've also created a couple more. So I'm going to add a color in, and what we're going to do is we're just going to simply copy and paste these values over. So I'm going to drop that inside there, and we're going to rename this one. This is the title BG background. Add one more in, which is going to be used in various different parts of the site. And we're going to do exactly the same. Drop that inside there and rename this, call this tile border. Okay, so we've now created our first set of global colors, but you can see nothing's actually happening. And that's because we're not actually referencing any of these just yet. So let's come back out of here. We've got our global fonts. So now we can set up the various different typography that we want to use throughout our site for the 4 key areas. Again, your primary, secondary, text, and accent. But you can also, again, add more inside here if you want to. So you can create custom headings and all those kinds of things and very quickly apply that. And you don't have to do it inside the site settings area. You can do that inside the normal editor should you want to. And we'll take a look at some of those things a little later in the tutorial. So let's just set up some various different values. So the first thing I'm going to do for primary is we're going to use this for our headings. So we're going to do a search for the font Dosis, and we're going to select that. And we're just going to leave any of the values except for the weight, because then what you can do is you can assign these independently based upon various different things like your headers and so on and so forth. Line height, we are going to change this, and we're going to set this to M's, make sure that's on there, and we're going to set this to 1.2. If we need to tweak this at any point, we can do, and we can come back and make those changes inside here if we should need to. Next up, we're going to do the secondary, and we're going to do the same thing again. So this is going to be Dosis again, and you can set any other parameters inside here should you want to. Just take a little time to set everything up. And then the third one we're going to do is the text, which we're going to set up to a different font. And this is going to be a font called Bitter. So we're going to choose that from there. We're going to set our line height to 1.7 Ms. Okay, so there's the key ones that we needed to set up. Now I want to set one more up, which is going to be a custom one. So we're going to say add a style, and we're going to give this a name. So we're going to click inside here first of all, and we're just going to call this title meta text. And we're going to change the values inside here as well. So we're going to change this to Nanito. And we choose Nanito Sans, for example, and anything else we want to set up. So we'll set our weight to 400, for example, and our line height to 1.1. Okay, so we've created those, but again, still nothing is showing up inside here. That's because we're not actually referencing these just yet. So we can rectify that by hopping into the typography setup. And this is where we can set up the key values, the colors, all the different things for the actual physical text on the page. So for example, the text color, you can see we've got the traditional color picker, which we can click and we can go and find a color. Or we can click on the little globe, which allows us to choose any of the global values you've set up. So we click on there and you can see there's all our colors. So we want this to be primary, for example, and that will change all this to primary. However, for this is going to be our body text color. So we're going to change this to be text, and that will set the value up inside there. If you want to change any of these, you can do. You can come in, you can reset this to clear it, or you could create your own color. For example, you could go for something completely different, and then you can click the plus, and you can add that as a new global color. So should you find you want to do this later on, you can do it very easily. However, we're going to set this now to be the text color. That's perfectly fine for this example. Paragraph spacing, we can set that up inside here, and again, we have to choose the font. So at the moment, we've got the option to choose it manually, or we can choose it from our global options. So we click on our global options, and we're going to set this to be primary. And you see now everything changes to the primary. However, we want the headings to be different. We want the body text to be the bitter font that we chose. So we're going to choose typography, and we're going to just choose the text option. Now you can see everything changes. And that's perfectly fine in this example, because we've got all the options underneath now to control the link, the headings 1 through 6. So what we can do now is we can say we want to set the color for the links. So we're going to click on our global again, and we're going to set that to our purple color. Typography, we're going to leave that as it is, because that will inherit what we set as the body. So everything will inherit from the body down. So we can change now the heading. So again, we can do the same thing. We can choose our default color, set that to primary, choose our typography, set that to primary. So that'll pull up the alternative font type. And then what we can do is we can tweak that by choosing the pencil icon, and now we can set up the sizing. So we can say that, for example, we want our main heading to be something like 42, And if we want to, we can set that to be a heavier weight, entirely up to us. Then anywhere that uses that font and that particular H1 tag will be set to this particular styling. So it will inherit both the default global settings we set up and also the individual settings that we configure inside the H1 itself. So now I'm going to repeat that through the H1 through to H6. I'm not going to bore you. I'll pause the video and we'll come back. Okay, so there's our heading setup, our body text setup. So that's our text side of things all done and dusted. So now we can move on and we can start to configure other areas. So things like buttons, for example, we can choose the button. Typography, what we're going to do is we're going to choose that global option. Like we said before, we're going to set this to be text. So you can see that changes the font over now. Text shadow, we're not going to worry about things like that. Color and typography, we can change all those options inside here should we want to. But we'll leave that set to text and not worry too much about that. I'll change my text color and we'll just choose from our global colors. Again, we'll set that to white this time. Background color, well, we're going to change that and we're going to choose our primary, and you can see our buttons now reflect all those different settings. So I'm not going to bore you by go through all of these, but what you can see is that you can reference all the different elements and you can set up things like your typography, your buttons, how your images display, your form fields, all those kinds of really useful things. Now on top of those things, we've also got extra options, things like site identity, background colors, and those kinds of things. So if we hop into the site identity, this is where we can change the name and we can upload our logo and so on. So let's just change this to Love Food Website. And we're going to get rid of our description thing on there. We're going to drop in our site logo. So we're just going to choose the plus and we'll upload the logo that I want to use for this example. Give it an alt tag and we'll just insert our media. You can see there's our logo inserted, and if you've got a favicon you can insert that inside here as well. You can come back out of this and you can set things like your background color. So if you want to set a background color for your entire site, you can do just that really easily inside here. So let's just say, for example, we want to set this to be a really pale gray. We can choose that option. We could choose one of our global colors, or we could set up a unique color. So you can see if we add that in, you can see our background color changes. So we could set a really pale color should we want to, entirely up to us. Once you've done that, then you could just update this, and you can also simply come into this, click on our color chip, click on plus, and we could just set this, change it from new global color to default site background, and click on create. So we've now created a color directly from a different location where we haven't done that inside our global colors. But if we click on global colors, there's our default site background used, and we can access that and reference that anywhere throughout our entire site. We've got options, things like layout. We can control the content width, all those kinds of things. So let's not worry too much about more on there. All those settings can basically be left as they are, other than the things I've just shown you. Now, if we hit update, we've committed those alterations to our site, and we can start to utilize those. So that's basically how we set up these global site settings so we can use them throughout our design and speed up the whole process of designing our site. So first on our list of templates are the headers and footers. These will be listed on every single page of our entire website. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into the theme builder under templates, and you can choose the new option to try it now. We can take a look at the new way of working, and this is the sort of new layout for working with the template builder or the theme builder as part of Elementor. So what you can do is you can click to add a new header in, and once you do that, that opens up the editor and we can start setting things up. Now, you could build your header completely from scratch if you want to, but for this example, we're going to use a template, and then we're going to edit that template because it's a quick and easy way of getting started. So we'll insert that. That will download all the template files. You can see that now inserts it. Now, one of the things that's kind of a little frustrating when you're working with Elementor in this fashion with the theme builder is it doesn't give you the option to create the name for the template, and that can just kind of get a bit confusing. So what you can do is you can come into the settings section and you can see there's your title. So we can change that, and we're just going to call this default header. You can see that now updates and we're good to go. So now we can come in and we can select this section at the top, which is where we've got our header set up, and we've got a left section, which is our logo, got a main section, which is our menu, and we've got a phone number over on the right hand side. So let's just see how we can change all these. So at the moment, this is just set as an image. So we're going to delete that from there, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the site logo widget. So we'll drag and drop that up inside there. And you can see that now pulls in our logo that we set up inside our theme style. So that's pretty quick and easy. Next thing we're going to do is make sure we've got the entire section selected and just tweak this a little bit, because at the moment it's got a negative margin and I don't want that to be in place. So I'm going to select the advanced option and we're going to remove that negative margin and set that to be just 0. That now pushes this down and allows us to see what's going on a little better. Now we can just start to style everything. So we're going to come back over into the style section, making sure we have the entire section selected. We're going to choose the classic option to get rid of the gradient that's in there. And you can see we have that same little icon for the global setting. So what we're going to do is we're going to just click on that. We're going to choose our primary color, and that now changes that and shows us the primary heading using our color scheme. So pretty cool to see that. Next up, we've got the menu area. Now we haven't created or configured a menu just yet, so we'll come back to that in a moment. So before we go ahead and sort the menu out, let's just save this and set the parameters for this. So we're going to click on publish, and this will ask us then what conditions do you want to set up for where this template is going to be used. We'll just click add a condition, and then we're going to say entire site. So that will be the default header throughout our entire site. Makes the whole process really easy. Okay, so now we can click and we can just select the menu, but you can see there's no menu available to us. So we're going to press Control and E, or Command E if you're on a Mac. And what we're going to do is we're just going to search for menu. And you can see that allows us to find the menu section, and we're going to jump over to the menus. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to name this main menu. And we'll just leave the default options inside here. Just so we've got some content, we'll just remove these two useless pieces, and we'll create our menu. We're going to just set this to be the display location of primary, and again we'll just hit save. So we'll come back later and we can add to this, but for now this is all we need. Come back to our templates, into our theme builder, and there's our default header, so we can edit this with Elementor. Once we've done that, we can then just make sure that everything is configured. Now you can see it's picked up our menu, but if that's the wrong menu for any reason, you can simply select it, and then you can come over and you can change your menu from this top section on the left hand side. And now if you want to, you can go through and configure any of the options inside here. The styling, everything can be configured. And again, you can see we can choose from our custom options. So we can choose from there, and we could say we want to set this to be primary, for example, or we can change this and be the text. However you want to set this up, it's entirely up to you. And if you want to create something completely custom, you could do that inside here as well. We're going to leave that as it is there with this global font for our text, and we'll leave it like that for now. We just need to hit the update option on there, and then we've saved any of the changes we've made. So now we can come back out of this, exit to our dashboard, and we're going to come back into our theme builder one more time. We're going to choose footer as an option, and you can see this is the earlier version of being able to edit the template files. You can come back into try now if you want to go back into that new theme builder, or you can do it from inside here. Both will get you to the same point. So you add new footer, we're going to call this default footer, and we'll create our template. And again, we could create this from scratch. We could use a template to start off with, however we want to work. And for speed, I'm just going to use a template. So we're going to just use something simple like this, insert that into our design. If we want to make any changes to that, we can make changes, but we're going to leave it as it is for now. We'll just hit publish, add our condition like we did last time, and again, choose entire site. We can hit save and close on there, and that's everything done. So if we want to view our live site, this is what we have at the moment. There's our header, there's our footer. We have no content because we haven't created any templates or added any content to the site just yet. But that's the first two parts done. That's our initial templates all set up, ready to go. Now it's time to delve into the fun stuff by using JetEngine to create our custom post type. Don't worry, if you're new to this, I'll break every step down for you. And if you need more help, then I have a full playlist full of goodies listed in the description below to help you out. So we're going to create our custom post type first of all for our recipes. Let's hop over into JetEngine, and we're going to choose the option for post type. Inside there, you can see we have a blank setup. So we're going to choose add new. And now we can just set everything up. So the first thing we're going to do is just give this a name. So recipe name is going to be recipe, or the post type name is going to be recipe. The slug is going to be the same, just all lowercase. We're going to leave everything else as is there. Labels is not something we need to change, but if you want to configure these, and it's just basically what you'll see in the left-hand side. So when you come up with things like Elementor and you've got these different entries, you can kind of control what yours says underneath the recipe section. I'm going to leave those as they are and let the default values work on there. Then we've got advanced settings. So inside here, we can configure anything we need now to make sure that everything is set up the way we need. So all these options are basically going to be left as they are. We don't really need to worry too much about those. Scrolling down, you can see we have options to have an archive. Now you need to make sure that that is selected. By default it will be, but for any reason if it's not, if you don't enable that, you cannot create an archive and associate it with your custom post type. So if you find any problem, this is probably the reason why. Hierarchical. We're going to leave that set as it is. We don't need to worry about that. We're going to change the icon on here to something that's just a little bit more in keeping with regards to the food. So let's just take a little look. We'll just put a carrot in there, for example. Doesn't really matter too much. And once we've done that, we've got the supports option. So this is basically saying what out of the normal WordPress post type features are we going to enable as well. So in other words, we've got the title and the editor. We also want to put in the featured image. So we click and we're going to choose thumbnail featured image. So these are the three key fields that are part of WordPress itself, and we're going to add on top of that with our custom options. So moving on down, you can see meta fields is the next thing we have available. So we're going to click to add our custom meta fields in. We're going to click to open that up, and we're now going to just choose all the different fields that we want. So the first thing I want to put inside here is going to be the preparation time for this particular recipe. So we're going to drop that in for the label, and the label is just basically what we'll see on the actual page itself inside the dashboard of WordPress with our custom post type. So this is just a visual representation of what the content is going to be, and you can write whatever you want inside there. Click underneath, that will pre-fill out the name and the ID. If you want to change this, you can do. You just need to make sure that you don't have any spaces inside there, and you always separate where a space would be with either an underscore or a dash. So by default, it's pulled in preparation time, and for this example, that's perfectly fine. Object type, field is what we want, but you do have extra options inside there if you need to take a look. And then we're going to set the field type, which is going to be, in this example, numeric. So we're going to set this to be a number. You can set your minimum and your maximum value, any step values. You can drop a description if you want to help people understand what this particular field is for when they input in data. But in most cases, this is going to be self-explanatory. And if you want to add things like conditional logic for when this will show up, or you want to set things like the field width, you can do that inside here as well. I'm not going to worry about those because they're more cosmetic than what we need in this example. So we're going to add a second meta field in. And this one is going to be for our cooking time. So again, we're going to drop in the title. We'll click underneath. It'll pre-fill out the name ID. We don't need to change that. We're going to change this over to number for the field type. Leave all the other values as they are. And we're going to add another field in. So this time, this is going to be what's called the yield. In this example, the yield is just basically how many portions are you going to get out of this particular recipe. And again, we're going to leave that to be the name ID that it pulls up. We're going to leave this as text, and we're going to leave everything else as it is. We're going to keep on going, and we're going to add in this time a description. So this description is going to be a really short description of the recipe, and we're going to use this on the actual card itself. In other words, the really short description so people can see and get a taster of what this is all about. Description is fine. We're going to change this from text, and we're going to set this to a text area. So we can't do any styling or anything. This is just to allow us to input basic text information. We'll add another meta field in. This is going to be for our ingredients, and this is where we want people to be able to really get in and add a little bit more formatting and styling and so on. So we're going to change this from text, and we're going to choose the option for WYSIWYG. This gives them the ability to control things like bold and bulleted lists and things like that. So really useful. Another meta field, this one's going to be for instructions. And again, this is going to be basically a replica of what we've just created. So instructions, set this to be a WYSIWYG, and that's all we want on there. Can add another meta field in. You can kind of get to see where we're going with this. It is basically just setting up the simple rules for each of these different kinds of fields and setting the type of field it's going to be. So the label for this serves is going to be, serves is perfectly fine. I'm going to set again to be a number. Now it's worth, when you're doing this kind of thing, just giving a little bit of thought. Do you want to filter against various different values? So we want to filter against things like the number of people it will serve, or the number of calories that are in a meal, those kinds of things. We need to set those to numeric just to make life a lot easier, so we can use nice simple sliders. So it's good to get an idea of the types of content you can create through meta fields, making sure that it kind of matches how you want people to filter, and if you want people to filter. So you'll see what I'm talking about when we get onto the filtering side of things with this entire tutorial. So we're going to add another meta field, and this is going to be calories per serving. And again, we're going to set this to be a number. Almost at the end now, we're getting to the last part. So this final one is going to be nutrition, and this is a more complex field type. So we're going to drop in nutrition. Name is perfectly fine. We're going to change this over from text, and we're going to create a repeater. Now, if you don't know what a repeater is, it's quite simple, but can be quite difficult to understand when you're not used to the terminology, you're not used to how things work. When you create a custom post, in other words, a post type like we just created, inside that post type are a list of meta fields like we've just created. Well, if you consider a repeater is like a nested version of that. So inside a repeater can have its own small collection of meta fields that sits inside your custom post type. So it's like another level. And because these allow you to keep on adding as many of these entries as you want to when you're in the dashboard of WordPress adding content, it means that you don't have to worry if you don't create enough fields for this. So in other words, the nutrition could have a single value, for example, for sugar or fats or something, but it could end up with 25 or 30 values. We don't know, and we don't want to have to make our lives more complicated. So a repeater is a really good way of being able to work with this. If you want a more detailed tutorial on how to do this, using this basically the same setup as we're using now, I'll put a link in the description below, and I've created a dedicated video just to working with the repeater. Okay, so we're going to add first of our nested fields in. So we're going to add the first one in, and this is going to be simply type. In other words, what type of nutrition are we talking about? And again, you see, pre-fills out the name underneath, and then the type. What do we want to do? Text is perfectly fine. So you can see it's exactly the same as creating a meta field. There's just fewer options inside there because it's nested into our main custom post type. Hope that makes sense. Now the repeater field, and we're just going to call this value. And this is where we're going to put the nutritional value in. Now, because we're not working with just numbers, we're going to be working with the actual value. In other words, it's going to be like milligrams, grams, those kinds of things. We don't know what people are going to use. We're going to leave this as a text field just to make life easy. So that's going to be perfectly fine as a text field. And then the final one we're going to do is the percentage of allowance, because what we're doing with this is we're putting the actual nutrition, we're putting the value, and also what of your percentage daily allowance does this take up. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in our third and final nested repeater. We're going to drop in percentage of allowance, click underneath there, and we're going to set this one to be a number. Okay, so that's everything we need done. If we scroll on down, we can see we've got admin columns right at the bottom. And the admin columns just basically allows you to add any of these fields we've just created into the custom post type listing, where you can list all of the different entries inside this custom post type. This example, recipes. I'm going to leave that blank for now, but you could add in there if you wanted to. So we've created our custom post type. We're going to hit add post type. And that will now create the post type and do everything else we need. So you can see on the left-hand side, we now have recipe inserted into our dashboard. We're now going to help with the organization of our newly created custom post type by adding in a custom taxonomy to group our recipes into logical sections. We'll also be using this taxonomy to filter our recipes a little later in this video. So we're going to come over into taxonomies under JetEngine, choose the taxonomies option, and now we can create our first taxonomy. Now, taxonomies are really, really useful for us because we can use these in various different ways. We can use them to simply group different kinds of recipes together, and a recipe could be in multiple different taxonomy groups. For example, it could be lunch, it could be dinner, it could be a starter, it could be in multiple different things. But the benefit of this is we can also use this for filtering, which is what we will do a little later on. So it's always good to consider, do I want to use a taxonomy or do I want to create a custom meta field for various different ways of grouping information together? Have a little think about this before you start getting stuck in and creating your different custom post types and your taxonomies and so on, just to give yourself the best chance of being able to create an easily filterable, easy searchable, and easily organizable amount of content using your custom post types. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new taxonomy. We're going to give this a name of recipe type, and again we click underneath, you can see this creates the slug automatically. The post type, now in other words, what are we going to associate this taxonomy with? If we click inside there, all of the options we have available, including anything we've created, as well as a range of different things that are just built into WordPress itself, such as posts, pages, media, and so on. But we want to associate this with our custom post type of recipe, so we're going to choose that from the list. Now you can associate this with more than one different post type if you want to, so you could make global taxonomies and associate those to various different things should you need to. We're going to keep this simple and leave it just associated with the recipe. The next thing we want to do is we're going to leave the labels as they are, but again you can see there's all those same kinds of options we saw when we created our custom post type, and if you want to change those, you can do. What we're interested in though is making sure that everything is configured correctly inside the advanced settings. So we're going to come through, just make sure everything is right. And what we're going to choose is hierarchical. Now, you don't need to choose this. It just makes the whole process of being able to link your post with your taxonomy just a little bit easier, because it gives us a list of checkboxes as opposed to an empty box that we have to start typing in, which can kind of be a bit confusing when you don't know what categories or taxonomies are even listed as part of the custom post type. Again, I hope that makes sense, but all I would say is generally it makes sense to put the hierarchical on when you create a taxonomy, because it's, from a usability point of view, it's just better. Add our taxonomy, and if we come out to recipe now, you can see there's our recipe type. So we've added our taxonomy into that, and everything is now configured for our custom post type and our taxonomy to group things together. Now, before we move on, it makes sense to add some sample content so we can use that as a visual guide to help us with building the templates, layout, and so much more. So let's do that next. So I'm going to show you all the different options we have now inside our recipe and also our recipe types. Then I'm going to bore you showing you how you can put all the data in, because I'm pretty sure you could probably figure that one out without any problems whatsoever. But let's come over to the recipe, into recipe type, and let's take a look. So this is no different to setting things up if you're using posts and categories or tags. This all works in the same kind of way. So we can do something like add breakfast in, for example, and we'll just say add new. And there's our breakfast category. Add another one in, desserts, add category, all sorted. Added that one in there. So I'm going to go and add in a pile of these, and then we're going to come and take a look at what options we have in the recipe itself. Okay, so there's our different recipe types all ready and inserted. Let's head over now to the recipe option and we can see what's in there. So at the moment, we just got the title and the date, nothing more. Let's add our first recipe in. Let's go past all this. We don't need to worry about that. Okay, so let's have a quick look. There's the normal title and the content area, because we enable those as part of our custom post type, and also the featured image on the right-hand side. Then everything else below this is all custom. So the preparation time, cooking time, yield, description, and so on. And you can see the WYSIWYG editor in various different places, our nutrition information, which is our repeater. And also if we take a look at the recipe type, all of the recipe types we just created. So everything is now linked together and working the way you'd expect it to. So I'm just going to simply fill all these values in for one of these items, and then we're going to take a look at how this all works. Okay, so that's our first entry inserted, all except the nutrition information. As you can see, it just works exactly the same as a normal post inside WordPress, just with an extra pile of fields that are custom to this particular post type. But let's take a quick look at the nutrition to see how that works. You can see at the moment it's totally blank, and we could leave it that way if we have no nutritional information available. However, we click on add item, you can see there's the three fields that we inserted into our repeater. So now we can just basically fill out the values inside here, and we're just going to drop in a couple of different values just so you can see how it all works. And we'll drop in 12 grams, for example, and we'll say that's 20% of your, or 10% of your daily allowance. We'll add another item in, and this is where the beauty of these comes in, is that you can easily keep on adding content just to make sure that you've got all the values you need and not have to worry about how many values there actually are. Okay, so with that being said, that being done, we can keep on adding if we need to, but for this example, we're going to hit publish, and we're going to just say, there we go, that's published. So now we have our first item inside here. There's our healthy vegan deep pan pizza. So I'm going to go ahead, add a couple more recipes in, just so we've got some extra options to work with when we're designing things, and then we'll move on to start to build out the templates that we need to actually start displaying all this information. Listings are at the core of JetEngine, and we're going to be creating two right now. One to show each of our recipe details, and also a simple layout to display our repeater field's nutritional information. To do that, we're going to do, first of all, we need to create the listing. And to do this, we need to come into JetEngine and choose listings. Now the listings is where we create the template for each one of these individual items, the recipes, how they be displayed on the sort of archive page. And again, this will become evident when I create this and show you how it all works. So what we're going to do is we're going to create that basic template. So you're going to say add new. Posts is perfectly fine. We're going to change the post type from, we're going to change this to our custom post type, a recipe. We're going to give this a name, and we're just going to call this recipe listing. Elementor is what we're going to use, but you could use Gutenberg if you're using that as opposed to Elementor. So that is an option if you want to use it. And we say create listing item. This will take us into Elementor, and we can start building everything out. Now what I like to do here is come down into the settings section, and you can see we have an option called listing settings. We're going to click on that. We're going to change this listing source to Post is perfectly fine. Post type recipe. And we're going to set our preview width. So I'm going to set this to about 450. This because it just makes it easier when you're designing something, because this is probably around about the size it's going to be seen inside our design. Do we want to make this listing clickable? We're going to say yes, we do. The link source is going to be permalink. And if you want to leave anything else in there, you can do, but I'm going to leave that as it is. Okay, so now we can start building this up. So the first thing we want to do is just put in a simple single row column. Don't worry about spacing and things like that at the moment. It doesn't really matter too much because we're not going to see any of this around the page anyway. We're just concentrating on this small area here. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is build up the various different parts of this. So the first thing, we're going to come in, we're going to scroll right the way down until we get to the JetEngine options. And what we want is dynamic image. We're going to drag and drop that into our row. And post thumbnail is what's included there, and that is perfectly fine. Post thumbnail is exactly what we want. And now if we want to, we can configure any of these items inside here. We can say what size image you want to use. Well, we'll use medium large so we don't end up with a massive image being loaded. We don't need to. Set the alignment to center. We'll say linked image, yes. You say permalink, that's perfectly fine. We don't want to set any of the values on there. You can set a fallback image if you want to, if someone forgets to upload an image itself, but generally you shouldn't have to worry too much about that side of things. And then if you want to do any other options for styling and so on, you can do that in the normal way. So next up, we need to start adding in some more data. So we're going to come back to our widgets. We're going to scroll down until we get to JetEngine again, and we're going to grab the dynamic field option. Drag and drop that underneath, and you can see this now says the post term user object for the source, which is perfectly fine in this example, and it defaults to title, which again is perfectly fine in this example. So now we can just set up whatever styling we want on here. At the moment it's using a div tag, but what we can do is we can change this and we can set this to any of our different fonts. So you can see H1 through to H6, you can use a paragraph or a span on you or a div. So if you want to style it in a certain way, you might want to use a div or a span, but for this example, we're going to set this to be H3. That's perfectly fine. Do we want to do anything else? Nope, looks pretty good as it is. We might want to tweak the sizing and so on in a moment. But the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drag and drop in some metadata. So we're going to scroll down again until we get to that dynamic field option, drag and drop that underneath. And this time we don't want to use the source of post term. We're going to change this to be post meta because we want to reference some of our custom metadata from our custom post type. So we're going to choose metadata. And it says what field you want to use, and then all of our fields are there underneath our recipe. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to grab the preparation time, and you can see that just basically puts in the value of 60, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to most of us. So we can go ahead and configure how this all works. So what we've got to do, first of all, is we're going to come down and we're going to choose the option to customize field output. When we do that, we get this little symbol inside there, which kind of might look a bit confusing to start off with. But really, all it is that's a little macro. That's a way that JetEngine knows to output the content of this particular meta field. But what we can do is we can add extra information before and after it, and we can also style that with HTML. So let's just say we know this is preparation time. So we'll just put in preparation time and a colon. And now that makes a lot more sense. And we can go afterwards and we can just put mins in. So now people can look at that and they can go, okay, now I know exactly what it is you're talking about. It's the preparation time. Cool. Now to make that stand out a little bit better, we can just wrap this in the strong HTML tags, which will just put this into bold. There we go. So you can see now that makes a lot more sense. Preparation time, 60 minutes. Cool. Pretty easy to do. What we can do now is we can duplicate that if we want to. But before we do, I want to set up just a little bit of styling on there. So we're going to select this, make sure it's active. We're going to come back over and we're going to go into advanced. And from there, we're going to set up how we want to deal with this positioning wise. So we're going to say we want this to be positioned, and we're going to say we want this to be inline auto, which what this means is that we can have anything that's below it on a larger display will move up and sit in line with this, as opposed to sit one underneath the other, which could get a little bit sort of, look a little bit rubbish. So now we've done that, we're simply going to right click and we're going to just choose to copy this, or we can right click and we can choose to duplicate it. Doesn't really matter. And you can see this has picked up exactly the same styling, all the same parameters, and as you can see, this sits on the same line. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the first item, and we're going to come over to advanced, we're going to uncheck the link for the padding, and on the right hand side, we're just going to set 10 pixels padding, just to give us a little bit of breathing space. We'll do exactly the same on the next one. Uncheck, on the right hand side, we'll put 10 pixels. Okay, so Now we've got 2 preparation times, which makes no sense whatsoever. So we just need to change the values on this. We'll select it, come back to content, change the preparation time, and we'll change this to cooking time. We can change then inside the format, and we'll just change that to cooking time, and everything else is working as we'd expect it to. We're going to do it one more time. We're going to duplicate this, and we're going to change the values inside there, and we're going to change this time for calories per serving, and we're going to just change the values as well. So again, calories on the first part, and we'll just put per serving at the end. Pretty cool, pretty easy to do. So now we've got all those laid out, and if the size of the screen changes, it'll compensate for those various different positions on those individual items. So that's the first part of that done. We're just going to drop in a simple divider underneath there, and we're just going to quickly configure that. We'll set that to about 20%. Solid is perfectly fine. Alignment left, style. We're going to come in, we're going to choose our primary color, but we're going to adjust that, and we're going to drop the opacity down on that to make it a little less in your face. And we're also going to set the weight on this to something like 2, for example. And we're going to adjust the gap in between as well, just so it gives us a little bit of breathing space, and it separates that then from the information we want to place below it. Now, speaking of the information below, we're going to do exactly the same as we've just done. We're going to grab a dynamic field, drop that underneath our little divider. Now, if you find this doesn't work too well, you can just position it, and then you can just reorder these if you want to. And you can, if things makes easier, just open up the navigator, and you can drag and drop from in there. Sometimes Elementor could be a little bit finicky when it comes to moving things around. Okay, so this is pulled in the title again, which we know is incorrect in this example. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that to metadata. And this time we're going to just reference our description, which is just a simple, clean, plain text field. And there we go. If you want to, you can change this from div, and I'm going to change this to P, so it picks up the paragraph tag. And for this example, if you want to make it a bit smaller, you could easily just come into the styling and adjust it from there. And again, you can choose any of the default values. So we can choose our text color, we can change our typography, we can set this to the secondary value, we can set it to primary value. What we probably want to do though is set it to text. And there we go, that's now picked that up. But we can tweak that if we want to. So we could say, for this example, we might only want this to be about 12 pixels in size, up to you. But I'll just reset that value on there and leave it with the default. Okay, so now we've created most of this. The next thing we want to do is drop in a link and then style it to look like a button. So it's pretty easy to do. Again, we're going to come down to our jet options, and this time we're going to choose a dynamic link. Drop that underneath there, and you can see that just pulls in a read more link, which is perfectly fine, but we can change that if we want to. The source permalink, perfectly fine. That's exactly what we wanted to do. It's the permanent link for this particular individual recipe. Read more is perfectly fine, but if you want to change that, you can change that inside the label. You can change anything you want inside here, to be honest, but we're going to keep this straightforward just so you kind of see exactly how all of this works. So let's hop over to our style option. Now, you might be wondering why this isn't picking up that button styling we set up as part of the theme styles. That's because this isn't a button, it's just a link. We're going to make it look like a button though. So what we need to do is just tweak a few things on here. Under the style setting, typography, we're going to just click and we're going to choose text. If we want to, we're going to come into our background, we're going to change that. And we're going to change the color, and we're going to choose our primary color. And again, this is where the beauty of using our global colors comes in. We don't have to guess or have a list of all these values. We can just keep referencing them. And if we change them globally. Choose white for our text. There you go. So we're already looking more like a button. And then we can come in, we're going to unlink this, and we're going to just set some values inside here. So we're going to go for 15, 30, 15, and 30 again. So now we look more like a button, and we're simply going to come into the border radius, and we're going to set 8 pixel border radius. And if you want to change the size of the text, you can do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back up to our text and make this just a little bit more in your face. We're going to just come in and we're going to just click, and we're going to change this all to be a little bit heavier, and we're going to set this to be all uppercase. So now that stands out more as a button. Okay, so let's just update this page just to make sure we save all those changes. And like I say, if we want to make changes to any of this later on, we can do. So we might say, well, we want to make a little bit more space where this line is. Well, let's just come in. Let's just add a little bit of margin at the top there. Let's just try 10 pixels. That looks better. Pretty cool. Now, the last thing I want to do is just style the container this is going to sit in. Just select the container. Once we've got the container selected, we can now apply some styling. So we're going to come over to our style, and inside here, we're going to go into our border. We're going to put a border radius because I want to round the corners off just a little bit. So we're just going to set those again to 8 so it matches the button. Now you won't see anything at the moment because there's no way of seeing the difference between the actual container and anything behind it. Once we've done that though, we're going to come into our box shadow, and inside here, we're going to just change some values. You can see now it already looks a little bit more 3D, should we say. Let's adjust the blur on here. We're going to set this up to about 25, somewhere around there, and I'm going to drop the opacity of the shadow because I want this just to be a lot more subtle than this. Okay, so there we go. So we've now created what we want to do. Next thing I want to do is just make sure that this looks a little better, because you can see the spacing around this doesn't look particularly great. So we're going to adjust that next. Now to do that, we're just going to simply come into each of these elements. We're going to come into advanced, and we're just going to put a little bit of padding on the left and right. So we're going to say 15 pixels maybe, try that, 15, that looks better. And we're going to do the same with all of these. So what I can do is I can just simply come into left and right, and we just say 15 on left, 15 on the right as well. And then we're just going to copy this, and we're going to paste that style on both of those just to speed up the process. We're going to do the same kind of thing on here as well. So we want to put padding 15 right, 15 left, and finally we're going to do it on the text area. So again, I know this is kind of boring, but it's one of those things that these little tweaks make all the difference to stop everything just looking flush against the edges. So for this one, we're going to do 15 right, 15 bottom, and 15 left, so it sits off the bottom of the container, and we'll just hit update. So now we've created the card that we're going to use for our listing. So that's the first thing. We can use this in lots of different places. So it's really cool how we can use this. So that's how the listing works inside JetEngine. And that's the first listing created. Let's just come back out of Elementor. And from there, we're going to close this down, back into our listings, make sure we're inside there. We're going to add new. And what we're going to do is we're going to set all this up. So at the moment, this is saying posts, but we're going to change this to be a repeater field because we're going to set the template up just for a repeater. So choose that option. It says from what? We're going to say this is going to come from our recipe custom post type. Next on our list is the repeater source. In other words, where's the repeater being created? JetEngine is perfectly fine, but you do have other options. Then we've got the repeater field. Now, this is where we're going to put in the name of the repeater. So if you're unsure, you can simply hop back over to your custom post type, take a look at your repeater field, and there's the name or the ID. Again, all lowercase. So we're going to copy that from there just to make sure we don't end up with any mistakes. So copy that, hop back over, and we'll drop that inside there. So then we're going to give this a name. So we're just going to call this nutrition repeater, just so we know where it is. And then we'll list in view. We're going to use Elementor to create this. But again, you can choose from Gutenberg if you're using that. Create our listing item. Once we've done that, we've got a really simple layout we're going to create. Simple 2-column layout that's just going to contain the information from our custom post types. So let's just add a new 2-column single row setup on here. We'll just hop over to the left-hand side, set our column gap to be no gap, so we control all the spacing on here if we want anything. And also we're going to just make sure that this is set to have a vertical line of middle to make sure anything we place inside here will sit in the middle of each of the cells. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create our first piece of meta information. So again, we're going to come back to our widgets. We're going to scroll down until we find dynamic fields. Drag and drop that into here, and you can see this pulls in what it thinks is right, which is not in this case. So we need to change that and choose the option for repeater field. Once we've done that, it says, what's the custom repeater field you want to use inside here? So again, if you don't remember, you can simply hop back over, and there's our 3 repeater fields, the type, the value, and the percentage of allowance. So what we're going to do, we'll expand type out first of all, we'll select the name, and we'll copy it. We'll hop back over to our template, and we're going to just come into the second area, and we're just simply going to paste it inside there. And you see that now pulls in this example, trans fat, which is one of the values we have set up. So now if we want to style this, do anything we want to with it, we can do, but we'll leave that for a moment. And what we're going to do is we're going to simply duplicate this. So we'll just right click, duplicate, and we're going to change this from type, come back over, and you can see our next option is value. So again, we'll do the same thing. We'll copy that from there, head back over, change that field to value, and you can see that now pulls in 12 grams, and we're going to do it a third and final time. We're going to duplicate that, push that over to the right hand side, and we're going to select it, come back in, and we're going to grab our third and final repeater field, grab the name, copy that from there, head back into here, and change that over to our new value. So we'll paste that inside there, and you can see there's our 120. So now we can just quickly go ahead and format anything we want. So like we did before, we're going to select this first dynamic field. We're going to come into the advanced option, and inside there, we're going to come down to positioning, and we're going to set this to be inline. Once we do that, that now gives us the ability to bring this value for the 12 grams in this example into the same line. So we're going to select that, do the same thing again, advanced, come down to positioning, choose inline, and you can see that now goes up to where it needs to go. So we'll just grab our trans fat again, and we're just going to simply add a little bit of margin on the right hand side like we did before. I think it was 5 pixels. That now makes a lot more sense. So we can just leave those as they are, and we can do the same thing on this value. We don't need to worry about putting this in line because it's the only thing that's on this particular section. However, we do have a couple of things we want to do. First of all, we want to adjust the alignment. This needs to go over to the right hand side. So we're going to say widget align and field content align all over to the right hand side. Now, we also want to put a percentage at the end of this. So normally you'd think when you come in, you go to customize your field output, and you scroll down and you drop the percentage sign in there. And when you do that, the value disappears and we get a gray box. Why? Because we can't put a percentage in there because JetEngine thinks that's part of a macro. So how do we get around it? Well, let's take that percentage off, that last one. We'll delete that from there. And what we can do is we can use the HTML code for a percentage sign and drop that inside here. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Now, this is a pretty cool little site, and it gives you all of the different codes you can use to insert various different elements. So things like percentages and so on. And as you can see, we've got Unicode, hex code, HTML code, and so on. What we want is this little HTML code. So make sure whatever you copy the entire thing, including the semicolon at the end. I'm going to copy that from there. We'll head back over, and we'll now just come in and we'll paste that inside there. Once we do that, you can see we now get 120% because it's not using the percentage sign, it's using the HTML code for the percentage sign. So if you ever struggle with this, that's exactly how you use these symbols and avoid any problems whatsoever. Okay, so we've created this. The final thing I want to do is just simply select, first of all, this first column. We're going to come into style, and we're going to grab a border. We're going to set a single solid border. We're going to set the width to be 1 pixel at the bottom. And we're going to use a really light value. And for this example, we'll just use the title BG. And we'll do exactly the same. So we're just going to right click on the column, copy this, and then we're going to go over to our second column. And like I say, if you find this difficult, you can use the navigator. So we're going to just grab the second column, right click, and say paste style. So that's now given us that underlined style. And if you want to adjust that, you can make it lighter, darker, whatever you kind of want to do. What we need to do now is just save or update this, and we have created our second listing section. So that's those basic templates done. We've got the listings all set up. So now we can start to use these in the various different main theme files we need to create as templates. We're now ready to start working on the more creative stuff. We're going to start with the archive template that will list all of our tasty recipes. To do that, we're going to come over into templates, and we're going to choose the theme builder option. And from there, we're just going to choose archive. We're going to create a new archive, and we're going to give this a name of default recipe archive. We'll create our template. We're not going to use any of the predefined templates. We're going to start this off completely from scratch. So we're going to close that down. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to build out some of the key elements of this. So the first thing we want to do is put some kind of header onto the page itself. So let's add a simple block inside there, single row column. And we're going to add extra bits and pieces as we go through this. So don't worry too much. We're going to come back and we're going to tweak various different elements on here. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to set the height of this, and we're going to set this to be something like, I don't know, maybe 400 pixels high, somewhere around there. Doesn't need to be massive. So we'll just choose this. We'll say the height is going to be minimum height, 400 pixels is fine. Hop over then to the style. We're going to come into classic for our background, and we're going to select a background image, and we're going to use this particular image. We'll insert that inside there. Obviously it looks a little bit rubbish at the moment, so what we need to do is deal with that. So position, we're going to say bottom right, because that's where most of the interest is in this image. We can leave this to default, but you could, if you wanted to set it to scroll, or fixed if you want to create a sort of parallax type effect. Repeat, we're going to say no repeat, and size, we're going to say cover. So now it already looks considerably better. Next thing we're going to do though is we're going to drop in a background overlay over the top of this, just to make it a little less in your face and allow us to see the text and things that are going to go over the top of this. So to do that, we simply choose a color, and we're going to just choose our black. Like I said at the beginning of the video, it's always handy to have just a plain black to be able to use it wherever you want. Now you can adjust the opacity on here to taste. I'm going to leave this set to about 50% or 5 because that kind of gives a good starting point. So the next thing I'm going to do now is drop in the title for this page and some other information, and later on we'll come back and drop a search box inside here once we've created the search filter inside Jet Smart Filters and Jet Search. So with this all in place, let's grab a heading. And what we're going to do is we're going to just grab a normal heading inside there. We're going to set this to be H1. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply a little bit of our own custom styling to this just to make it look a little bit more interesting, because it is a kind of primary header on the page. And then I'm going to show you how you can save that as a separate sort of style that you want to use. So H1 is perfectly fine. We're going to set this to be center aligned. We're going to just change the text in a moment, but for now we're just going to come into style, and under style we're going to just configure how we want this to look. First of all, we want to change the color. We're going to set that to white, so it already looks better. And you can see now why I put the sort of overlay, because it makes the text just stand out a little nicer. Next up, we're going to just tweak the typography. So we're going to expand the typography option out, and we're going to change the font size, and we're going to set this to be 75. We're going to change the weight on this to be something like 600, and it already stands out a lot better. We're going to change the line height to be, we're going to try 1M, which is basically the height of one of those letters in between. We might need to tweak that if things go onto 2 lines, but we can adjust that as we need to a little later. Now, once we've set that up, we probably want to use this on other parts of the site. So what we can do is, instead of having to try to remember all the different settings we're configuring inside here, underneath the typography option, we can just simply click on Create New Global Font. Click the plus, and we're just going to give this main, we'll just call this main banner header style. There we go. We'll create that. So now that's something we can reference again and again and again. Okay, so we've styled everything, but we need to make a few changes because this is an archive. We don't really know what the name of the archive is going to be, because it can change based upon the type of recipes you're looking at. So, you know, vegan, vegetarian, dinner, those kinds of things. So we can reference this information and use some dynamic tricks to do this and make it a little bit more cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to just change a few things on here. We don't want to put in the title manually. We want to use the dynamic tags option, and we're going to change this over, and we're going to choose the option for page title. So we're going to scroll through until we find page title. And there we go. There's our page title. So we've got the first part done, and you see nothing's coming up at the moment. So what we need to do is click on this little wrench icon, and from there we can now configure how this is going to look. So we're going to say show home title. Now nothing is going to show up at the moment because we don't have any filters applied to this. But what it'll do is it'll pull up the name of the actual section we're looking at. In this example, the recipe type. We're going to also come into the advanced section, and underneath the advanced section we're going to put some text before and after. So the before is going to be find your perfect, then the dynamic data, for example, vegetarian, vegan, dinner, those kinds of things. And we'll put in after that, we'll just put in after recipe. And you could put a fallback if you wanted to, but I'm going to leave that as it is for now. Okay, so that's that first part done. Now, because we're seeing no actual data on here, it makes it a little bit difficult to kind of figure out what's going on. So we can deal with that side of things by just coming down to the bottom left-hand corner, into the little cog icon, into the preview settings. And what we can do is we can change that from there, and we can say we want to use this as a recipe archive. Hit apply and preview, and that will just pull up. You can see, find your perfect healthy vegan deep pan pizza recipe. So it's not quite right at the moment, but don't worry about that, because like I say, this is just using the basic info at the moment. Okay, so we're going to drop in something else underneath here now. We're just going to grab another heading, put that underneath, and we're just going to adjust this. We'll set this to like heading 5, center align it. We're going to drop in just a little bit of text. So I'm going to say, search our database for blah, blah, blah. So now what we can do is, let's set this to heading 4 actually. We can now tweak that text as well. So we can come into the style. We can say we want to put the text color. We'll set that to be white. And if you want to make any changes, you can do that here as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into this, and I'm going to just reduce the opacity so it isn't quite so bright and in your face. Okay, so there's our header section set up for our archive. We're going to drop, like I say, a search inside there a little later, but for now we're just going to leave that as it is. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and build out now the content of our archive page. And again, we're going to be using some JetEngine features for this. So the first thing we want to do is create the layout for this. So we're going to set this to column. We're going to have the search or filters on the left-hand side and the content on the right-hand side. So let's just select this, come in, and we're going to add, try 50 pixels above and below. Actually, let's go a little bit higher than. Let's go for 100. Let's push the boat out. Okay, and we're going to adjust this left-hand column. We're going to set that to example for 20%. Actually make this 25%, just so it's a little bit bigger. Okay, so now we've done that. The next thing we need to do is go ahead and just put some information inside here. So the first thing we want to do is just grab the listing to place inside here that'll show us the different recipes for this particular section. To do that, we come back out to our widgets, scroll right the way down, and we're going to just grab the listing option, the listing grid, drag and drop that inside there. It says, please select a listing to show. Well, we're going to select this and we're just going to just search for recipe. And there's our recipe listing. Once you do that, you can see that now pulls in some recipes for us. Pretty cool. Nothing too complex about that. And now we can easily change this over to get the styling that we want. So 2 columns is perfectly fine. And you can see now they've picked up that styling we just set up. Doesn't matter which recipe you're looking at. Each one of those has all the styling set up, laid out the way we configured it inside that listing template. So pretty cool to see how this all works. So now you can go ahead and you can fine tune any of the values on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say use this as an archive template. Yes, we're going to set that to be true. You can do things like lazy load, so depending upon the number of items on the page, you can select that. We're going to say equal column height. And then if you want to set anything up like your post queries and so on, you can do that inside here. But for this example, we don't really need to set anything up because we're just creating the template. So with that being done, we're going to leave the left-hand side for now because we don't actually have any filters to place inside there. So we'll come back and edit these once we get the filters set up. But we do want to put a title inside here. So we're going to just grab this and we're going to say we're going to put in the archive title. Drop that for there and give that a second, and you can see that now pulls that up. That will change based upon the different section we're currently looking at. So that's perfectly fine. That's just kind of like a placeholder for this. And what we're also going to do is we're going to just come in and we're going to grab this option for a divider, drop that inside there. And again, we're just going to tweak this. So we'll set this to about 20%, left, solid is fine. We're going to set this to 2. We're going to adjust our gap on there to be 1. And we're going to change our color to be primary, like so. So now we've created our archive page. So pretty cool. Let's hit publish. And now we can set up the parameters or the display conditions for where this is going to be used. Let's choose add condition. We don't want to set it to all archives though. We want to set this to be recipe archives. So any recipe archive will display this custom template. We're also going to create a second one. Expand that out, and we're going to change this, and we're going to say recipe type is equal to all. So whether it's the recipe archive or the recipe type and any recipe type, this is the template that will be used. Hit save and close, and we've created our first of our templates. Okay, so things are starting to take shape now. So let's just have a quick check to see how this page template looks. I've already gone ahead and copied the link over for this. And this is where we are right now. So there's our custom header, and we're looking at the dinner section at the moment. And you can see, find your perfect dinner recipe. So it's picking up that section, recipe dinner, and you can see these are all the meals that are underneath the dinner section. So things are looking good so far. Now we've gone ahead and built the archive page to list all our recipes, we need to move on to creating the template for the recipe itself. So let's do that next. So let's come into single post, and from there we're going to add a new single post, and we're just going to call this default recipe single, just so we know exactly where it is. We'll create our template, and as before, we'll start with a completely blank layout so we can build this entire thing up from scratch. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is just set the basic layout. To do that, we're just going to add in a simple 2-column section, like so. And we're going to just put the spacing above and below. So like we did before, we're going to drop in 100 pixels above and below. Now, obviously, you could create this in any way you want. I'm just going to show you how you can put the various different elements in and how I've styled it, but you can get as creative as you want to here. Okay, so the left-hand side is where we're going to put the actual recipe and all the information about the time it takes to cook, the ingredients, all those kinds of things. On the right-hand side, For this example, we're going to have two different sections. We're going to have the nutritional information and the repeater we set up. And underneath that, we're just going to put in what would be used as a sort of sign up to a mailing list or something. It's only going to be fictitious, so you could fill this out and use this as you want to. I'll just show you briefly how to add things like that in. Then you can just go off and get as creative as you want. Okay, so how do we go about building everything? Pretty straightforward. Let's just start adding in the different elements we need. So we're going to come back over to the left-hand side. Now, you have the option if you want to. You can use the normal single post title, post excerpt, and all those kinds of things that are part of Elementor Pro. But if you're not using Elementor Pro, or you want to just leverage some of the extra features that you get as part of JetEngine, then you can come down and you can start to use their own widgets. So things like the dynamic fields, dynamic image, and so on. So let's do that. Let's grab the dynamic field first of all, drag and drop that inside there, and that's going to pull in what it considers to be the right info. Now you can see this says default recipe single. Well, that's not what we want. So let's come down to the settings. Under preview settings, let's just change this and say we want to use recipe. And we'll just choose a recipe. It doesn't really matter which one. Let's just do the chili soup. I think it's the chili soup. So let's just do that. There we go. And we'll apply and preview. And then that will update and show us the data that we want to see. In this case, the title. So now we can go ahead and we can style that like we've done before. So as we've seen, we can change this over. We'll set this to be H1 because it's going to be the primary thing on the page. And there's the title for our individual item. One other thing I want to do is just set the styling on this font. So I'm going to come into the typography. We're going to leave everything on there except for the fact I want to come in and set the transform to be uppercase. To be capitalized, so it puts a capital letter at the beginning of each of the words. I think it just looks a little bit nicer. Okay, next up, we're going to drop in some meta information. So again, we're going to come back out of our widgets, grab the options. We're going to say dynamic meta, drag and drop that underneath there. And that pulls in the date this was posted, who posted it, and the number of comments. So now we can enable, disable, whatever we want to do. So I'm not too bothered about the comments because let's just say we're not using comments in this example. So we'll disable that. And now we can just tweak and fine tune the date and the author. So we expand that out. We can change and add icons if you want to. So we can just click on there and we could just search for something like, I don't know, a clock or something. We'll choose that as an option to say when it was posted. And we'll just also search for a little person for the author option. So you can get as creative as you really want to on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to search the icon library and we're going to just search for user and we'll grab this symbol. Insert that, and now you can style that, and we'll cover that in a moment. We'll just get everything onto the page, and then we'll deal with all the styling options and things. Okay, so there's those things. Next up, let's come back into our widgets, and this time we're going to drop in the image, so dynamic image, drag and drop that onto our design. There's our featured image, post thumbnail, perfectly fine. You can set any styling, all those kinds of things on here as well. So moving on down the page, next one we want to do again is just dynamic meta information or dynamic information again. So dynamic field, drag and drop that in, change that this time, and we want to use the option for the content. So there's our content. As you can see, that drops all that information in there. So that's the first part of this. So this is the first part of our template pretty much done. The next section is just a little bit more complex in the way it's laid out, but not any more complex in how to build it. So this is just building various different elements together to create something that just looks a little bit more visually interesting and grabs all the information about the preparation time, the cooking time, and those kinds of things. Next on the agenda is we're going to grab an image and we're going to post the actual author's image up onto our layer. So we're going to drag and drop that inside there. Choose the dynamic tags option, and from there we're going to scroll down and you've got the option for author profile picture or user profile picture. We want the author profile picture. We're going to set that to the center, and we're quickly just going to hop over and we're going to set some things up. So the border radius, we're going to set that to be 100% all the way around to make it a nice circle. We'll put a border on that and we'll just specify something like, I don't know, we'll just change that to, let's just try something like 4 pixels. And we'll set our color to be our primary color. That looks pretty good. Okay, so that's that side of things done. Next, we want to put in the information about the preparation time and those kinds of things. So it's time to hit up our widgets, and this time we're going to grab an intersection and drop that below our image. We're going to set this to be just one column, so we're going to delete that second column. And what we're going to do is just make sure everything looks good. We're going to set this to have no gap. So just select this intersection, column gap, no gap. We're going to set the background on this to be our background color of our primary, and there we go. So now we're just going to drop a couple of elements inside here just to make things look pretty cool. Okay, first things first, let's just grab some dynamic content, and we're going to grab this dynamic field, drag and drop that inside there, and we're just going to make sure everything looks good. So first thing we're going to do is choose what goes in there. So we're going to change this to metadata because we're going to grab some of our custom metadata from our custom post time. And from there, we're going to grab the option for preparation time. So we're going to grab that. You can see that now just puts the value. Now you probably can't see it very well, so let's just change the styling on this, set the color of this to be white so we can see what's going on. And while we're at it, we'll set the typography to be our text. And we'll also just quickly tweak this and set this to be italic. Okay, that looks pretty good. And finally, we'll set that to be centered. Okay, so it does make a lot of sense because what does 15 even relate to? So we can change that by coming back to our content, scroll down, customize field output. And this is why it does make sense to use the JetEngine widgets because they just give us more control. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this prep time, colon and the space. And then afterwards, we're just going to put in mins. So now there's our preparation time. We can duplicate that and we'll just change that preparation time and we'll change the value, and this is going to be cooking time. And we'll do the same thing again. Change the prep time and the field format and just call this cooking time. Okay, so that's those sections done. We're going to drag and drop in a separator. So we're going to drag this divider in between the two. If I can get it in. The section in the middle. Okay, so that hasn't worked very well. So like I say, sometimes it just gets a bit finicky, and it's where the navigator can kind of come in really handy. So let's just take advantage of that. As you can see, it didn't drop that in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back over and we'll do the same thing again. Drag the divider over, drop that somewhere in there. Oh, there we go. It's gone in this time. Okay. With that in place, let's just configure that. We'll set that to be something like, say, 65%, centered. Solid is perfectly fine, and we're just going to quickly tweak the values inside here. I set this to white. We're going to set the weight to 2. Adjust the gap so there's next to nothing there, like so. And we're going to adjust the opacity of this so it's a little less evident and more of a subtle line inside there. Okay, so that's that side of things done. The next thing I want to do is just give this a little bit of spacing around it because it all looks just a little bit squashed up. So let's just select this section. I'm going to come into advanced and we're going to just put 25 pixels of padding all around it. So that already looks better. But our image at the top is just kind of floating there. So how can we deal with that side of things? Well, what I want to do is I want to make this kind of look like it's overlapping onto this section here. So let's do that. The simplest way to deal with this is to work with some negative margins. So what we're going to do is make sure the inner section is selected. And from there, we're going to come to our advanced section, unlink these two, and we're going to set the top margin to around about -70. And you see that puts it into the right position, but as we can see, the image itself is now sitting underneath. So we need to rectify that. So we'll select the image, and all we're going to do is we're going to hop over to advanced, and inside there we can use the Z index to control exactly how this is all going to display. So we just need to set a higher value than what is being used for this in the section. So I'm just going to come in and just set something like 99. That'll do. That doesn't really matter because we're not using it much anyway. Now you can see what that does is it positions everything right, but obviously we need to put some more space at the top of this section to push everything down, otherwise it all looks a bit squashed up and a bit silly. So let's rectify that. We're going to grab this dynamic field, this column. Actually, that'll be fine. We can do is we can grab the intersection actually, and we can do is we can change the margins as the padding on here. So we're going to change this, we're going to unlink them, and on the top we're going to add in some extra padding. So we're going to just say, let's try 50. That looks okay. Let's try 60, see what that looks a bit better. That looks better. And I'm just going to quickly just adjust the values on these just to make sure everything just sits a little bit better. So on this line, we're going to just close that gap up a little bit more and do the same kind of thing. A little bit of negative margin on the top, say -20. That looks better. And do the same on this section. So we're going to do the same thing and link those. Try -20. Actually, let's go for let's try 30. That looks better. Okay, so now things look a little bit better, a little bit neater, all lined up, and we've got this sort of overlapping effects. That looks pretty cool. So next thing we're going to do now is add the description, the ingredients, and the instruction section below this. So we're going to do the same thing again. We'll come back over, going to grab an intersection, drop that underneath. So say if it doesn't go where you want it to go, which it doesn't, as you can see, a lot of the time, we can just position it wherever we want. And then we'll simply use the navigator to position things. So we'll close this intersection down and we'll drag that underneath that intersection. And you can see that's now positioned where we want it to be. Let's delete that second column. So we're just going to delete that. And we're going to do like we did before. We're going to select this entire section and we're going to set our column gap to be no gap. So now we've dealt with that. What I'm going to do now is just put an outline around this that kind of mimics the color that we have above it to kind of box all this off. To do that, we're just going to make sure this section is selected, come over to our style and into border. And from there, we can now configure exactly how this is going to look. So what we're going to do is just set up all the values that we need. To do that, we're just going to set the border type to be solid. We're going to change the color then to our primary color. And what we need to do now is just unlink these options and we're going to set 0 for the top because we don't need one there, and we'll set 5 pixels for everything else. So we now get this boxed section and that's where we're going to drop in the various different parts of our recipe. So what we'll do is we'll come back over up to our widgets. We're going to come down and we're going to select the option for dynamic field, drop that inside there, and we can just configure this. So we're going to say this is going to be metadata. Going to change this, going to be description. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a bit of spacing around that just so it looks a lot nicer and neater. Easiest way to deal with that is make sure we've got this entire section selected. And what we're going to do is we're going to just put 25 pixels of padding all around it. There we go. So that looks much better. Let's grab a heading and drop that above there. And we're just going to call this description. Otherwise, we have no idea what any of these blocks of information are all about. We'll set that to something like, let's try H4, maybe H5. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And all we're going to do is we're going to tweak that a little bit. Text color is perfectly fine. We're just going to change the typography to be primary. And we're just going to make sure that this is styled just a little heavier. So we're going to say we want this to be, let's try 600. And we're going to say this is going to be uppercase. That looks pretty good. Okay. What we need to do now is just grab another divider, drop that into place, and we're just going to tweak that like we've done before. We leave that at 100%, that's perfectly fine. Close the gap up, change the color, primary color, and what we're going to do is just lower the opacity on that and set that to be 2. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So now we can just literally go ahead and duplicate all these different elements, then just change their values. So we'll do, first of all, we'll just duplicate this heading section. We'll drag that underneath. As you can see, again, it's a little bit finicky. I mean, gotta be honest, Elementor can make this a bit more difficult for us than it need be. We're going to change this to description, to ingredients, and we'll just duplicate this and drag it down on the navigator because it's just so much easier. We'll select that. We'll change the metadata from description and choose ingredients, and then we'll do the same again. So we're just going to duplicate the divider. We'll drag that duplicate down in the navigator. We'll duplicate the ingredients and we'll drag that down in the navigator because again, it's just easier. And you can duplicate from over this side, to be honest. This dynamic field, we can right click, we can duplicate, and we can just drag that down. So there's various ways you can achieve the same end results. So we just need to now change this title. This is going to be instructions. And finally, we need to change the metadata that's inside here, and we change that for instructions as well. Okay, so there's our basic information. Everything is laid out the way that we want. So that's the first main part of this done. Let's just publish this just to make sure we save it. So we'll hit publish. We'll add our condition, and then we're going to say, is this all singular? No, we just want this to be for the recipes. So we'll hit recipe. All is perfectly fine. Hit save and close. And that's the first part of this done. We now need to put the repeater in the top right-hand side. So to do that is quite straightforward. First thing we're going to do is just grab a title. So we're just going to come back over, grab a heading, drop that inside there so people can know exactly what's going on. We'll set this to something like H5 and we'll change that to nutritional information. Okay, so that's that inside there. So the next thing we're going to do is insert our custom listing. So like before, we're just going to search for listing. We'll drag our listing grid inside there and drop that in there. So again, we've got to search for this. So let's just type in nutrition. There's our repeater, drag and drop that inside there. Obviously, it looks a little bit rubbish right now, but that's because we just need to set the columns to be 1. And then everything is now displaying the way that we want it to. At the moment, though, we are missing one thing. We don't know what this percentage relates to. So ideally, we need to put some kind of legend. The easiest way of doing that in this example is going to be just to insert an intersection between the title and the actual information below. we'll just select that and we'll just set this to have no column gap, and we'll just get rid of the second column and we just have it like so. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to drop in some text. So we're just going to grab this, we'll drop in just text editor, drop that inside there. We'll just set this to be percentage of daily allowance. Okay, so that's set up. We just need to go into styling. We'll align this to the right hand side. We'll set the text color and we'll set this to be the secondary color. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the typography and everything as well. So typography, we're going to set this to be secondary. We're going to tweak this to make it quite small. So we'll say something like 12, and we're going to set the weight of this to be a little heavier, maybe even go a little smaller, maybe something like that. That looks pretty good. And if we want to adjust the spacing and things on there, we can do that. So we can add just a little bit of padding at the bottom of that. So we'll uncheck the padding option, and at the bottom, we'll just say 10 pixels of padding, for example. Okay, so that's our information inserted in from our dynamic repeater, and everything is basically set up now for our template. If we want to add in this extra little section that I said about like to sort of sign up, we'll take a look at doing that next, but you don't really need to do this. You can skip this bit if you want to, and you're more interested in moving on to the next section. Okay, so all we need to do is we're going to come over, we're going to do another inner section, drag and drop that over to the right hand side, delete one of those columns. So we'll just delete that from there. And we're just going to use this now to create a sort of sign up section. So it doesn't really matter too much. We're going to select this, make sure that we've got the column gap set to no gap, and we can just drop in an image. So we'll come back over, grab an image, drop that inside there and choose an image. So we'll just grab this image of a burger. It doesn't really matter too much. It's more how you do it than anything else. And then we're just going to grab the form element, drop that underneath there, and we'll just select the entire thing, go to style, set a background color of white, just to make sure that there might be a difference between the two. And then we're going to go to border, and we're just going to put a really slight drop shadow. So but the same as before, but 17. And we're going to adjust this right the way down so it's quite subtle. Okay, so now we've done that, we're going to select the form and we're just going to quickly style that. So we're going to take off those labels, we're going to get rid of the message, and what we're going to do is we're just going to add a little bit of spacing around that. So we'll put something like 25 pixels of padding, that'll do. That looks pretty good. And we're going to change the button. So like we've done before, we're just going to come to our buttons. We're going to change our background color. We're going to set that to burgundy, even though it's already done. Text color, we're going to set to white. And what we're going to do is we're going to come to the typography. We'll set that to be secondary, and we'll just adjust that as well. We'll make it a little heavier, and we're also going to transform that to uppercase. And we're going to change that from the word send to make it a little bit more logical, and change that to subscribe. Once I find the button, there we go. Okay, so you could fill that form out, make it all set up the way that you want. The only other thing I would probably do on here right now would be the fields, and we're going to say the border color is going to be this light color. We're going to just change that to make it considerably lighter. I'm going to put border radius of 0 in, and that looks pretty good, to be honest. We'll just leave it as it is there. That looks okay. We'll just select this entire section and we'll drop a little bit of spacing at the top, put about a 50 pixel margin just to get some separation. Actually, probably let's make that 30. Okay, so now we've got that separated from this. Close the navigator down and we can see what we're working with. Now what I am going to do is just select this entire section. We're going to go to layout. We're going to adjust the column gap and make it something like wide, just to give us a little bit more breathing space between the left and the right hand columns. But other than that, that's all done. All done and dusted. So we'll hit update on there. And now we're going to go ahead and test this out just to make sure it all works the way we expect it to. Okay, so let's test it out. We're on one of our archive pages and let's take a look at the healthy vegan pizza. Click and you can see there's our nutritional information, all the details. There's our little sign up. There's all the layout, the information, the cooking time and so on, description, ingredients, instructions, all those things that we wanted included, all set up working for us. So the archive page is set up. We've got the individual single post page set up. Let's move on to the next item in our list. Things are definitely starting to shape up, and that leads us on to the most important page on our entire website, the home page. So let's start designing that to tempt our site visitors to look just a little bit deeper. So we're going to come into pages and we're going to add a new page in. We're just going to call this home page, and we'll just simply hit publish on there. So now we're going to edit this with Elementor and start building what we need. So the first thing we want to do is get rid of this title. So we're just going to select the little cog icon for the settings, hide title, and we are pretty much good to go. Next thing I want to do is just add in a single row column section. We're going to put our hero image at the top, which is going to include just a little bit of a sort of call to action and also a nice big search bar that we're going to add in a little later. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this. We're going to come over to our height and we're going to say minimum height. And we're going to set this to something like, let's just say we'll try 600. Going to come into our styles and we're going to go into our background, choose an image, and from there we're going to grab that burger image again and we'll select that. And we're going to kind of do the same thing as we did before. So bottom right, attachment is fine, repeat, no repeat, and we're going to set the size to be cover. Then we're going to drop into the background overlay, set that color to be black from our predefined global colors and leave the opacity at 5 or 0.5. So there's our section. So the next thing you want to do is drag and drop in our title. Now let's drag our title inside there, drop that in there. Now if you remember, we saved the styling that we used when we created that archive template, so we're going to use that on here. So at the moment we've got this selected, so we're going to come over and we're going to go into style. On the typography, we're going to click on the global option and then we're going to grab our main banner. We're going to select that and you can see that's now pulled in the styling and everything. So all we need to do is set the color, set the alignment, and we're done. Other than we need to put our own message in there, but you get where I'm coming from. So what we're going to do is we're going to just put in something that makes more sense, which is find your perfect recipe. Next up, we're going to just grab and put in a subsection, which tells people exactly what to do. So we're going to grab that, drop that underneath. We're just going to paste in a little block of text. We're going to align this and we're just going to configure a few things on here as well. So the size, going to change that to be global white again. Typography, we're going to set that to be primary so it knows, it makes sure it picks up the right styling. And we're just going to make this just a little bit more transparent. So on the color, we're just going to drop that down a little bit just so it doesn't fight for your attention alongside the actual main heading. Like I say, we'll come back in a little bit once we set the search up and we'll add that to our archive on our homepage. But for now, we're going to leave that there. So that's our heading section all done. Let's just hit update to make sure we save those changes. And next up, we're going to come in and we're going to add in another 2-column section like we've done before. Going to give this a bit of space. So we're going to give this 100 top and bottom to give us a lot of nice white space. Going to grab a heading to drop into the right hand side, and we're also going to grab another one of our little separator lines. So let's just grab that, our divider, drop that inside there. Quickly style that up. Solid is fine. All the usual things. Primary color, set this to 2, get rid of any gap. There we go. And we'll fine tune that a little later. Let's actually make this a bit smaller. Let's make this like 20%. Just to make it look a little cooler. There we go. Okay, so that's the first part of it done. Next thing we want to do is drop in another listing. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to search for our listing grid, drag and drop that into our design underneath our line. And you can see it says, again, please select the listing to show. So we're going to grab the listing and we're just going to do a search for recipe. And we're going to use that same recipe listing we used before. So this is the beauty of this. We're not having to create another one because the layout's exactly the same. Set that to 2 wide this time, and we're going to just grab this first column. We're going to set that to be 25%, and we're already looking pretty good. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is just change our heading, and we're going to drop in something a little bit more in keeping to the kind of content that we're working with. So let's just set that to be our latest tasty recipes. Going to set that, H2 is perfectly fine, but let's just make it a little bit heavier weight. So let's just say we want that to be 600. That looks pretty good. So I like the look of all that. Okay, so I'm liking the look of everything so far. And we've got all the things that we need inside here. Now, obviously, if we want to fine tune and tweak the way that this actual listing shows up, we have lots of options like post queries, term queries, user queries, and so on. So we could, if we wanted to, easily come in here and start filtering this. So we could create a taxonomy or tags or something like that that says this is a featured or something like that. And then you could easily just use those post queries to filter out to just show those kinds of things. Now, while we're on the subject of slightly more advanced ways of working, if you'd like to see me take this tutorial to another level where we take a look at doing some of these more advanced things, such as, for example, the ability to be able to upload your own posts from the front end. So you could have contributors that would have access, they could log in, They could add their own posts in, and then you as an administrator would confirm that once you've received an email. Let me know in the comment section below the kinds of things you'd like to see, and I'll take a look if enough people are interested in taking this to another level, making it more comprehensive again. But like I say, for now, we're going to just do the fundamental things we need to do to get this looking good. Okay. So that's those side of things done. We're going to leave all the filtering and everything out of it for now, and we're going to tweak anything on here. So like equal columns, for example, if you want to use that lazy load in, random posts and so on, up to you how you want to do it. 6 posts in this example is perfectly fine. So with that being said, we're going to simply hit update on here, and that's our home page pretty much done. All we need to do now is go over into our settings and set this as our home page. So we're going to come over into the settings, we're going to come into reading, and from there we're going to say we want to use a static page for our home page. And all that's left to do is change the home page to use our home page. There we go. Hit save changes, and we are done. So now if we come over and make sure we're on the home page, you can see there's our custom home page we've just created. So all looking good, and if we click on one of these recipes, we'll go into our single post template. All looking pretty good. Now we've built the key pages for our site, let's help our visitors find the perfect recipe from our collection by adding in some easy to use filters and a nice site search next. So to do that, we're going to come back into our dashboard, and we're going to come down into smart filters, and we're going to just go into the settings first of all, just to make sure everything is configured the way that we want it to be. Now, if you've never come into the settings, there are quite a few useful options inside here. When you're creating filters, you can pick and choose from quite a lot of different sources for the filters, or the way the filters interact with various different templates and page files. But you don't always use all of them. So for example, you can see Jet Woo products. I'm not using WooCommerce, so I don't want to see those. I'm going to uncheck anything to do with Jet products. I'm going to get rid of the JetEngine calendar because I'm not using those. So I'll just leave JetEngine and anything to do with Elementor, just in case I want to use that in the future. If we hop over to the indexer settings, you can see we can choose to use indexed filters, which basically means it'll index the various amounts of content, which should ultimately help speed up the filtering on larger sites. So we'll enable that. And I'm going to say, because this is primarily just going to use recipes, I only want to use the index filtering on the recipes post type. And then you've got the URL settings structure. So this is a new feature in the latest version of JetEngine. It allows you to change from having plain URL links to a permalink, which basically means you have a much nicer, pretty link if you want to share a filtered or searched page with someone else. So again, we're just going to set this to be for the recipe side of things, and that's the settings. That's all we want to do. No save on here because it's dynamically saved whenever you make a change. Okay, so let's go back to the smart filters and let's take a look now at creating the first one. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our search. Now you can see we've also got index filters at the top, which you wouldn't have if you didn't enable that option, and we'll just go back to that a little later once we've created some filters. So let's add our first filter in, and we're going to just call this recipe search, just because that's exactly what we're going to do. So recipe search, we'll copy that from there, and we're just going to paste that into the next two options for the filter label and the active filter label. Then the filter type, we're going to change this over to be the option for search. Now you'll only see this if you have Jet Search installed. So if you only have Jet Smart Filters, you won't see this option inside here. The placeholder is what we're going to see inside the search field. So we're going to say search recipe. And you can see it says default WordPress search. That's perfectly fine. We're going to leave that as it is. That's all we really need to do to create a search. So we'll publish that, and we've now created our search. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back out this, and we're just going to hit index, let that index any of the filters, and now we can go ahead and insert the search into our templates. So let's come into our template section, into our theme builder, and from there we're going to come into our default recipe archive. We'll edit that, and now we can drop in the search. So let's just filter our widgets out, and let's just type in search, and what we want is the search filter, which is the JetEngine one. And like I say, you can always tell the JetEngine ones, they have the little sort of green icons, they're colored, they just look a little different, although it would still be nice to have the little croco block C in the corner just to make life a little easier. Let's drag that onto our header section, and you can see that just pulls in a placeholder. So the first thing we need to do is select the actual search filter we've just created. So we'll just do recipe search. There we go. And we say this filter is for, what are we going to use to search against? Because this is a JetEngine custom field or custom post type, we need to change that and choose JetEngine. Once you do that, you can see that now sets everything up inside there. So if you want to change this between Ajax on type-in, page reload, or mixed for the kind of apply method, it's up to you. I like the Ajax option, but some people prefer to have the actual search button you click on to complete the whole process. Okay, so we're going to change the apply filter. We're going to actually delete that from there. And we're going to do a search for an icon. So we're just going to do a search for search. That just goes a little bit better. Okay, so that's that side of things done. Now we can style this out. So we head over to style. We're going to hit the option to have line. So it'll line everything up. Now you can see there's a little bit of a discrepancy here where we just need to kind of fine tune and finesse this to get it where we want it to be. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to set contents to be at the bottom like so. And then we can just fine tune the sort of margins and the padding and the various different parts of each of the input and the button just to get what we need. So let's go to the input first of all. Inside here, we're going to just set up a few things. So first of all, we're going to set the padding. So we're going to set 15 pixels of padding all the way around. It gives a nice big search box. We're going to set the option for border type. This is kind of a weird thing. You can't actually change things even though it'll show a border. So we're going to choose a border of solid, and we're going to just set the border width to be 0. So we kind of say there's a border, but we're going to disable it by having a 0 value. Border radius, we're going to set that to 0 on there as well. So that's the first part of it done. Now we just need to deal with the button to make that fall in line as well. So again, same thing. Choose the button. This time we're going to set some styling. So we're going to set the text color to be white. We're going to choose the background color to be our primary purple color. And we're going to set the border radius to be 0. The border type, again, solid. We're going to set the border to be 0. And we're going to set the padding to be 15. And as you can see, that doesn't quite work out. So we might need to tweak this a little bit just to make sure everything works the way we want. So let's uncheck those values and link them. And what we're going to do is we're going to just change the top and bottom. So we'll just bring those down until things start to line up. That should look about right. And we should be pretty much golden on this. We'll update that. And that's our search. So what we can do now, we don't want to duplicate this again, is we're going to select it, right click and choose copy. And we're going to come out of this, we're going to go to our home page, and we're literally just going to paste the same thing in there. So we're going to go back to our dashboard, going to go to our pages, all pages, open up our home page with Elementor, and then we're just going to simply paste that into the header section. So right click, choose paste, and there's our search function in our header. Hit update, and that's that side of things sorted. Before we move on and do our filters, let's just check that our search is all working. So we're on our homepage. You can see there's all our recipes currently. And let's just do something like type in pizza, hit enter, and there's our pizza and nothing else. So come back up, we'll clear that search from there, and we'll just enter, and there's all our values back. So our search is all working the way we expect it to. So now we can go ahead and start creating our filters. So let's go ahead and add another filter in. So we add a new smart filter. This time we're going to call this recipe category filter. And this is where we're going to search against our recipe types that we created, which if you remember right the way back to the beginning of the video was our custom taxonomy, which is there. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that. So we're going to just say this is going to be the recipe category. Remove the word filter from those two just to keep it a little bit shorter. And the filter type, we're going to change this now to be a checkbox list because that's the easiest way to be able to filter out based upon the actual categories that we're using. Select our data source. We're going to choose taxonomy because that's what we've created, but you do have other options like manual input. You can manually create the entries, posts, custom fields, and so on. Taxonomies works perfectly for this example. We don't want categories though for the taxonomy. We want to change that for our recipe type, which is the custom taxonomy we set up. Then you've got the relational operator. In other words, how do you want things to work? Do you want it to be union or intersection? Which just basically means, do you want them to be, if you select more than one entry, do they add them together? So in other words, you search or you filter for vegan and vegetarian, or do you want the one to be exclusive over the other? That's all it really kind of means. Now you can check anything else on here if you want to, but we don't need to. We're just going to leave everything as it is and hit publish. Once we've done that, we're going to come back out of here and we're going to add another filter in. So next filter we want to put in is going to be our calories per serving. So it allows us to filter based upon the calories. So let's put the title inside there. We'll drop the same in for the filter label and the active label. This time though, we're going to choose the option for range. Now a range allows us to create a really nice simple slider range that allows a nice visual, easy way to interact with the values that you might want to set. Okay, so now where do we get this information from? So you can see range is the filter type. And then we've got all these different boxes underneath, of which we're going to leave everything as it is, except for the very last one, which is the get min max dynamically. I'm going to say get from query meta key. I'm going to select that from there. And then we're just going to simply use the query variable. And the query variable in this example is going to be the name of the meta field that contains the values for the calories per serving. Have I lost you yet? Don't worry, I'm going to explain exactly what I mean. Let's hop back over into our custom post type and let's take a look at all the different options we have. And there's our calories per serving. Let's expand that out. This is what we're searching or we're filtering against. So we simply want to grab that value from there for the name and ID, head back over, and we're simply going to drop that value inside there, paste that inside there, and that's it. That's all we're going to do. So all we're saying is that we're going to use a range slider. We're going to get the values for the amount of calories and so on from the totals that we have as all of our records, and we're going to query it against the calories per serving, which is the meta field that we set up previously. I hope that makes sense. It can get a bit confusing, but the logic is pretty straightforward behind it, I think. We'll hit publish on there. We're going to add one more filter in just to make life a little bit more complex for ourselves. And this time it's going to be the cooking time. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add a new item in, and we'll just select cooking time, cooking time, cooking time. We're just going to add in mins at the end of that so it makes a little bit more sense. And we're going to do the same thing again. So this is going to be range again, because you want to have a nice simple slider. We're not going to set any values inside there. We're going to say get the values from the query meta key, and we're going to hop back over and we're going to grab the relevant key for this, which is the cooking time. So we expand that out. There's our name ID for the cooking time meta field. Copy that and simply paste that inside there. Come back up, hit publish, and we're done. So that's how we create those filters. Now we just need to put those filters into our template, into our homepage, test everything out, make sure it all works. So there's our 3 filters added to our search. We're now ready to go ahead and include these into our design. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over and work on the homepage first, because that's going to have actually slightly more filters inserted on it than the archive page is going to use. So let's just head over to our pages, and we're going to open up our homepage. We'll edit that with Elementor like before. And what we're going to do is we're going to start building things out on the left-hand side. So this is where we're going to drop in all our filters. So we're going to do like we've done before. We're going to drag and drop a heading inside there. I'm going to copy this line and duplicate that. And we're going to just put that underneath there as well. And we're going to just select this, and we're going to set this to be a slightly smaller, like a H4, for example. And just to make things a little bit easier, we're also going to drop this down a little bit. So I'm going to select this section, and we're going to put some margins inside there. I'm going to try about 100. That looks pretty good. That kind of brings it roughly in line with this section. So it just looks a little bit nicer. And we're going to change this now to filter recipes. Okay, so that's put that inside there. So now we can drop the filters in. Let's come back over, and we're going to just do a search for the option that we want, which in this example is going to be the checkbox filter. Drag and drop that where we want it in our stacking. Now again, you can see it's a bit of a finicky thing, so let's just open up the navigator and we'll drop that down underneath the divider, which is a bit of a pain, but not the end of the world. So the next thing we're going to do now is go ahead and choose what filter it is we want to use. For this example, it's the recipe categories. So we're going to just type in recipe, and there's our recipe category filter. And there's all of our different entries. So our breakfast, dessert, dinner, and so on. Everything we need inside there. So we've got some options now how we want to work with this. First of all, this filter is for. Again, we just need to set this to work with JetEngine, so it knows the data that it's going to filter against is JetEngine created data. Okay, so now we're going to have a little bit of fun, just making sure everything looks good the way we want it to. The first thing I want to do is pull up the filter label so people know what they're filtering. We'll choose that option, and there we go. There's our filter option. You've got some additional settings if you want to. Search enabled, more or less enabled, drop down enabled, scroll enabled. I'm going to leave all those as they are. I don't really need to change anything on there. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop over to the style section, and from there we can now just make sure everything looks pretty cool. So space between, we're going to adjust that. We're going to tighten that up a little bit to about 5. That looks pretty good. And we're going to change the way the checkbox looks, because I don't really like that at the moment. I want it to be square. I want it a little bit more in keeping with what we've got, our design. So we're going to just change a few things. Border type, we're going to set that to be solid. We're going to set the width on here to be 2 pixels, and we're going to just change the color to be our purple primary color. And then our border radius, we're going to set to be a percentage and 100 on all sides. So we now get a nice circle, which looks pretty cool. And we're just going to adjust the opacity on this just to make it a little less in your face. Next up, we want to change the label where it says recipe category. So we're going to come down and we're going to go into the label option. And from there, we're just going to tweak a few things. So we're going to just adjust this. We're going to make it just a little heavier, like so. I'm going to change our color to be the purple color. I'm also going to add a little bit of padding or margin at the bottom of that. So we've got a padding, and at the bottom, we'll just add, we'll try 10. That looks good. I like the look of that. And we might want to change the size this a little bit as well. Bump that up a little bit, maybe. 18 looks pretty good, maybe a bit too big. Let's go for something like, actually 18 looks pretty good. Okay, so that now is the first of our filters. Looks pretty cool. Let's add our next filter in. So we're going to do a search for range. We're going to drag and drop our range filter in there. And as before, we just need to start searching for this. So we're going to just do calories per serving. You can see that pulls everything up. So what we're going to do now is we're going to close this down on the right hand side, just give it a bit more room to work with. And we can start to fine tune and configure this now as well. First things first, let's just say we want to show that filter label so people know exactly what's going on. Select our filter to be JetEngine so it knows what to search against. And let's just hop over into the style section and start configuring this. First thing we want to do, set the color. Change that to our primary color, and that will allow us to change the line as it's being manipulated. We can also come down to the background color and do the same on there. So we're going to select that, select primary on there. You can see that puts the dots into the purple color. So again, it just means that we can see what's going on. Makes a bit more sense. And we can now change things like the label and so on. Let's hop to the label. Let's just change the typography to be text. And we're going to just come into there. I'm going to set that to be 18 as well, like we did with the last one. 600. And we'll just quickly adjust the actual color to make that the purple. We'll unlink the values on there for the value section, and we're going to just set 10 pixels at the top, so it gives us a bit of space on there. Okay, so that's the first one. Let's just duplicate that so we don't have to go through the process of styling everything again. We'll select that, and we're going to come and change that from calories per serving, and we're going to set this to be cooking time. Type search in for cooking. There's our cooking time. And everything else is now being set up for us, styling everything. I will put a little bit of extra space above this just to separate these out. So we're going to just come in, a bit of margin. We'll try something like 10 on there. That's good. And I'll also put a little bit of space on the right-hand side. So we're going to say 10 on the right. And we'll do the same above. We'll just go with the margins and we'll put 10 on the right there as well, just to give us a bit of breathing space down the right-hand side. We'll hit update on there. And that's all our filters set up alongside our search for our homepage. Now, to make our lives even easier, we're just going to select this column and right click. We're going to copy it. And we're going to then go over and just put that and edit that in our template for our archive. So let's exit to our dashboard, exit right the way back into our templates, into our theme builder. From there, we're going to open up the default archive with Elementor. Once that's done, we're going to simply drop that into our template. So we're going to right click. We're just going to say paste, and then we're going to get rid of this version of it. So we'll just delete that from there, and we'll just set this to be 25. And there's our filters. So the first thing I want to do is just remove this recipe category because it doesn't make sense when we're searching into a category itself. So we'll just update that, and we are pretty much done. That's the filter side of things all sorted. So what's really left to do now is test this out. So this is our homepage. Let's come down to our filters. Let's just say, let's go for lunch. So there's just the lunch items. You can see there's 4 out of the 6, and we want to limit our calories. We're on a diet this week. So let's just drop that down like that, 168. And there we go. There's just our pizza. So under lunch, in under 168 calories, we've got a slice of pizza. Pretty cool. Okay, let's finish things up by adding all our recipe categories to our menu to let visitors delve into the goodies on offer. So let's just do that by simply coming back into our dashboard. And we're going to go into appearance and into menus. And from there, we're just going to simply add this in. So we're going to add recipes. We're going to add a new item. So we're going to add a custom field in, a custom link. And we're just going to put in recipes, which is the name of our custom post type. So if we scroll back up, or recipe, I should say, so there's our recipe. So we just need to make sure that's exactly what we have inside here. And we'll put link text, recipes. We'll add that inside there. And now what we can do is we can come into recipe types. And we're going to say we're going to add all of these, select them all,
add them to our menu, and we're just going to simply put those all underneath our recipes section. Save menu, and we're going to go back to our site, refresh this, and there's our new section, new menu. We can come in, we can choose recipes, and that'll show us all of our recipes. Or we can come in and we can say dinner, for example, and that will show us just our dinner recipes. And as you can see, the title at the top changes to show dinner. Or if we come in and say, let's try something like, I don't know, let's go for vegetarian. You'll find your perfect vegetarian recipe. And there we go. There's our vegetarian recipe, and we can adjust things based upon our filters.
There are so many ways in which we can expand on the skills you've learned in this video. And if you'd like me to create a second part where we explore adding the ability for visitors to submit recipes and so much more, let me know in the comment section below. Now, as always, all of the applicable links are in the description, and if you've made it this far into the video, well, why not give that thumbs up button a click? It really does help me out. If you enjoyed the video though, also why not consider hitting that subscribe button and slap in the bell icon. But if you didn't enjoy the video or find value in it, well, feel free to hit the thumbs down button twice, as that works pretty well too. My name is Paul C, this is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.